About, it was 2001, so about 13 years ago, I read an article in, I think it was Time magazine, or one of those periodicals, about climate change, and it was an issue that I knew a little bit about, but I always kind of thought that this was something that somebody else would, this was the government would take care of this, or the scientists would take care of it, or the nonprofits would take care of it, but this wasn't really my problem. It was just somebody else's problem to deal with. And I suddenly, I read this article, and it said within the spectrum of possibilities was that the temperature on Earth would rise from 2 to 11 degrees, and 11 degrees being uninhabitable within the next century. And I thought, God willing, my kids are going to live 99 in the next 100 years. This isn't somebody else's problem. This is my problem.
It wasn't until college that I really was lit on fire with the environment. I started working for the student, actually helped manage the student recycling center. And then I went on to work in the field as an environmental consultant. So I think this was also the time that global warming was coming around, we were starting to understand what was going on. This was when Kyoto was all up in the air, so going back to the early 90s.
I grew up on a farm in western Wisconsin, and a story I hear from a lot of folks who work full-time on environmental issues is a connection to the outdoors, a connection to nature.
And I kind of went from being very uninvolved to going to the other extreme of saying, what can I do and how do I get involved, and really feeling passionate about the cause. It was kind of hard because I didn't have the artwork to show them. I didn't have a globe. I just kind of had this idea.
I worked at the White House for the first 2 years of the administration to try to pass a big comprehensive bill. And the frustration was particularly in the Senate, which didn't pass that big House bill. Those senators just weren't feeling the heat on the ground from their constituents and feeling the urgency of getting this done. And that was incredibly frustrating.
When I read about climate change, I often wonder how environmentalists can keep fighting. It seems like time and time again, they fail to convince others to take their side. How can they keep fighting in the face of such overwhelming odds? This issue encompasses government, technology, economy, world relations, developing countries, and nature. Well, we've got to start somewhere, so let's talk about us, the United States. If anybody has the money to invest in some new energy sources, we do. So why aren't we setting the example for the rest of the world? Well, from talking to 3 experts in the field, it seems like there's actually a lot of reasons why. During each of my interviews, all of my subjects shared their thoughts about why they think this is.
How political do I want to be in this?
The problem is we subsidize the fossil fuel industry, with billions of dollars in tax breaks.
Well, that was the Waxman-Markey bill, it was called. There was a bill that passed the House that would have set up a cap-and-trade system to combat climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it passed the House by about 4 votes, and it stalled out in the Senate.
Well, I feel that, just separately, I feel that unfortunately the state of politics today, anything the Democrats want, almost automatically the Republicans are against. Now, I think that there's philosophical differences because the Republican Party used to be based on conservation. And if you look back at Nixon, who started the EPA, you can even look back at great environmental policies that George Bush Sr. passed, that Reagan passed. I feel like in a way they've lost their way though. I can't really explain why they're that way, but anything that, most environmental initiatives have been under attack by the Republican Congress.
Yeah, exactly what you thought, right? But still, having a government that can't agree on anything does not go well with an urgent issue like this one. When asked, Wendy and John had different viewpoints.
I feel like this isn't just about ideology, this is about science, and it's not like, well, maybe I'll change my mind and I'll get into something else later. Like, climate change is going to continue to happen whether we pay attention to it or not, so I feel like we have to just keep fighting the fight because it's not going to go away.
You have to be a bit of an optimist. The optimistic way to look at that is no climate bill had ever even passed the House before, so we didn't get the job done, but that's how all of these issues work. Like, when they passed the civil rights bills in 1964 and 65, they've been working on that for decades. So that's just the reality of how you make change is incremental change over time that builds up to a point that you finally win the politics on these issues.
Whichever side you agree with isn't up to me, but I think that it is worth knowing that in a leaked report by the United Nations, well, it's sort of self-explanatory. So, the government can't agree, fossil fuels are being subsidized, and not enough people care. What do you do as an environmentalist? Go live in the forest, right? Well, no, you don't.
I guess I'm just more of a practical environmentalist. I'm not definitely the into the wilds type. I think that, there's extremes on all sides. I think if you just common sense pursue this, I think that will attract most people. So I kind of stay away from the extremes.
And that was the key word right there, practical. It's just not practical to think that all of humanity is going to drop everything and stop progressing. And John also informed me that it's actually not practical for even one person to do this.
The dirty little secret is they don't use no energy in the forest. That is not the most efficient, the most energy efficient place that human beings can live is in a dense urban city. That everyone out there in their own little cabin cutting down their own trees because you got to burn something to stay warm, and burning kerosene in a lantern. That whole approach is more land intensive and more energy intensive than living in an apartment in a city, taking public transportation to work, and I think cities are getting more and more and more energy efficient. They're producing their own energy. That is actually sort of pound for pound the most effective thing you can do. Yeah, think about it. Like, even live in some big high-rise, the cost to heat each individual apartment, sort of the cost for energy per person, is incredibly low compared to everyone having their own little farmhouse.
So, if consequences are imminent, yet we have so much to do, where do we start? Well, for one, vote! Seriously, if you don't like your senator and how they voted no on increasing offshore drilling regulations, then get rid of them. Also, invest in new technologies. They are here. I'm actually recording this in an electric car.
We need to show politicians that there is passion behind this and there's going to be a price to pay if they don't get it done.
Be relentless, be persistent.
There's so many different things out there. So I can never say there's one perfect solution. I think it's just a smattering.